What's up, house groups? I hope all of you had a great time celebrating Easter at church and with your families. It was a great day. And I want to say thank you to all of you who served in some capacity on Sunday. Thank you for giving your time and your talent to help people crash into Jesus and experience the love of God. You guys are awesome. So Easter is the greatest story in the history of the world by far. And I think sometimes it's so familiar to those of us who've grown up in or around church that we kind of forget that. We're just so used to hearing about it at Easter. And if you've been around Revision for years, you're just sitting there on Easter Sunday waiting for me to say, nobody was expecting nobody, right? We're so accustomed to all that, we forget how absolutely mind-blowing it is that nobody was expecting nobody, and there was nobody in that tomb. And I think, at least for me, it's not only easy to be less amazed and just like overwhelmed than I should be that Jesus died and rose again, but it's also really easy to feel judgmental toward all his followers who completely bailed on him, especially his 12 disciples. Like, they got the chance to be up close and personal with Jesus for 3 years. They'd even literally heard him predict his own death and resurrection. And as soon as things went south, they were gone. They ran away. They denied even meeting him, decided to pretend none of it ever happened and just go back to a life of being fishermen. And it's hard to read that and not wonder, how could they do that? Why did they do that? Seriously, how are they so selfish? And how could their faith have been that small? But as I've been thinking and praying about Easter for the last few weeks and going through the devotions Alyssa handed out at church to my kids, I've been trying to honestly wrestle with the question, what would I have done? How would I have responded if I were Peter or James or John or Thomas? And I can't help but think I would have done the same thing they did. Because Jesus' death disproved everything he said and asked them to believe while he was alive. And if he couldn't live to keep his movement alive, why would they die to keep it alive? Like, they killed Jesus and I'm going to be next. He's gone. I got nothing to gain. I mean, I'd have been out, just like the disciples were. And I'd have been trying to process the reality that the world wasn't going to be changed in the way I hoped. That pain and suffering and brokenness and hopelessness were just as real and acute as they ever were before I met Jesus. And I think, in fact, I'm certain, the only thing that could have shifted my thinking if I was one of them, the only thing that could have brought me back in was seeing the resurrected Jesus. And that's exactly what happened for the disciples. Seeing him alive again completely changed the game. It shifted everything, and it left them in a spot where they were willing to die to go tell the world who he was and what that meant for everyone. And every last one of them was eventually imprisoned and killed for sharing the good news of the gospel. Except John, they just tried to kill him a bunch of times, tortured him, then exiled him to an island to die. But why would those guys do that? How could they go so quickly from scared and timid to ready to die? Like in an instant, they were ready because they saw Jesus alive again. It's the only explanation. And I love the way Chuck Colson, he was a key advisor to Richard Nixon, eventually spent time in prison for his involvement in Watergate. I love the way he put it. He said, I know the resurrection is a fact, and Watergate proved it to me. How? Because 12 men testified they had seen Jesus raised from the dead, and then they proclaimed that truth for 40 years, never once denying it. Everyone was beaten, tortured, stoned, and put in prison. They would not have endured that if it weren't true. Watergate embroiled 12 of the most powerful men in the world, and they couldn't keep a lie for 3 weeks. So you're telling me 12 apostles could keep alive for 40 years and then be willing to die for it? It's absolutely impossible. You guys, Jesus is alive, and that changes everything. And here's the part I want us to wrestle with tonight. We can and should celebrate the resurrection because it's amazing. It means we're forgiven and set free. But if that reality doesn't cause us to live differently, then we're missing it. We're not fully understanding the implications. If it doesn't cause us to completely surrender and decide to set aside all of our selfish desires, all of the ways that we want to do what we want to do instead of doing what God wants us to do, if it doesn't cause us to chase the path God says we were made for, then we're just not getting it. We're missing part of what the gospel means. And I know sometimes we think we know better than God. Sometimes I think I know better than God. Sometimes I wish he would just get on my agenda. Sometimes we don't want the path God says we're meant to walk. But here's the deal. If he's risen, he's right. Like, there's no getting around that. Like, if Jesus was able to say, hey, I'm going to die and then rise again and then die and then resurrect himself from the dead, if he was right about that, then he's right about everything. Even the things you don't want him to be right about. And so my challenge to you tonight is to surrender all those things to Jesus. Because he's risen, and if he's risen, he's right. And if he's right, then the life, the meaning, the hope, and the beauty you were made for really are found in following him and not following your heart or your culture. And so the question is, will you follow him?